Welcome everybody again. April session, Dynamo user groups. Glad to see new faces. Those who don't know me, my name is Cesar Escalante, design technology manager for HOK. And along with a great group of volunteers, we facilitate this meeting on a monthly basis. Who's new? Welcome. So if you want to keep if you want to know what is our next announcements, please sign in our blog website. On the right side, there is a way to subscribe. And when you do that, you're going to get the announcements automatically with a link on how to register and the dates and times. And keep informed on every post in our website. Great. Hope you can comment to the next meeting as well. That's our website, SFDUG.blogspot.com. And we also have a YouTube channel. If you search for San Francisco Dynamo User Group, you can also look at the past recordings. We have now about 300 subscribers. Pretty good. And continue growing. So follow us on Twitter too. See the next. Just a few announcements. We started this Node of the Month series in this month. Node is remap range, and I'm going to spend maybe 5 minutes at the end of the presentation to explain what it does and how it could be useful in our workflows. Anyone is open to volunteer to do the Node of the Month. I mean, at the moment we are taking turns between the volunteers, but if you want to talk for 5 minutes about Node you find very useful and would like to present it to the group, let us know. We can put you for the next meeting. The DIM files are now available on the blog, so the presenters are generous in providing us this DIM file that can be downloadable from the website. They are aligned with the presentation, so last month are already posted. You can go and download for your own debug purposes. And register on Ebright if you're going to be here, especially those who are new. The security is not going to let you in if you are not signed up. I'm going to run the sign-up sheet as well to see who is here. And thank you to Ideate for the food sponsorship. And we have wine this month. Thank you, Brock. And next month, we have a great speaker. It's Alexandra Virgin from Autodesk Support. And she's going to talk about using Dynamo for model maintenance. So stay tuned for the announcements. Again, more speakers. Just contact us at the sfdug.coordinator@gmail.com if you want to become a speaker. Spots available for August, September, October. All right, I want to introduce our this month's speaker. We have Anthony Buckley-Thorp from Flux, explaining us what is Flux, how it can facilitate Dynamo workflows. The title of the presentation is Supercharge Your Dynamo Scripts. Thank you for coming. We're very happy to have you here.
Pleasure.
And hopefully we can continue this collaboration between you and our group.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me remotely? Should be okay? That's okay? It's fantastic. All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. My name is Anthony, and as you can see, I'm an application engineer at Flux. My background is in structural engineering. I was an engineer at Arup for about 8 years in London and then Shanghai, working on a lot of tall buildings with lots of different architects. A common theme of complex geometry led me into the realm of digital tools and a lot of kind of handling these kind of things. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about a little bit about Flux and where we've come from. I'm going to talk about our main kind of tool that you can go and use today. And then at the latter part, I'm going to show you some fruits from a recent hackathon that we had in our office. And everything that I show you, you can basically go and do for yourself. And so we've even got some Google Cardboards here in case any of you want to give it a shot for yourself a bit later. So yeah, first part, practical. I think the second part is going to be really fun and interesting. So without further ado, to quickly talk about the mission, where we came from, our interoperability tools, our opinion and our kind of philosophy on sharing, and finally the future. So some of you may know that Flux was born out of Google X, and this is a very familiar chart that you'll see with these Google X projects. And so how does this fit in with Flux? So first of all, the huge problem is global urbanization, and I think I'm preaching to the converted here. We all know that this need to build more buildings, to build better buildings, and so that everybody can benefit as well. It's a huge challenge that we're going to face in basically our lifetimes. The radical solution, knowledge sharing. That sounds kind of dumb, but I think, again, we know that we don't do the best job at sharing knowledge. If maybe each one of us as an industry practitioner is heavily involved with 50 buildings in our entire career, that would be kind of generous. And yet there's more than 50 buildings built every day, probably in California, if not wider. So how can we learn from each other? How can we make sure that all of the kind of cumulative knowledge of building so many buildings around the world can't be to the benefit of the next generation of builders? And the breakthrough technology, seamless interoperability. And so you're going to see today what this actually means in practice. So at Flux, we're about 32 to 35 people. We're growing pretty fast, so it's hard to keep count. We are a whole mixture of different backgrounds. We've got a lot of software engineers, obviously. We've got people from industry like myself, architects, structural engineers, mechanical engineers. We have designers. We have business development people, all manner of different people coming together in a single team to really tackle this problem. And so what's our secret sauce, our recipe? Well, one of the key things about Flux is that we talk about sharing data and not files. And so the idea of the BIM model, the idea of your sketch model totally exists, and that is exactly how it should be. There needs to be something that is delivered at the end of the day and is constructed. But how we get there doesn't necessarily have to be file-based. If I have some data which is just the center line of my columns, and that's what I want to share with the engineer, and then they share the sizes back with me, why are we exchanging entire files when really we're just talking about sharing lines or mesh or strings or text data? Our second principle is design first and tools second. And so we are trying not to create a tool that dictates the way that you design. We try to be a blank canvas and try and be agnostic to the things that you're trying to do. And finally, we're about design augmentation, not automation. This isn't about trying to just automate the design of buildings. This is about trying to automate the parts of your job that are just a pain in the backside, basically. If we can liberate designers from these menial tasks, from trying to fit these square pegs in round holes, so they can spend more time actually thinking about design and actually exploring more options, then we believe that's going to result in better buildings. So first up, interoperability. I'm going to quickly talk about our plugins. Again, reiterate this idea of data and not files. And then I'm going to go through an example heavily focusing on a Dynamo user's workflow. So today we have plugins for Excel, Grasshopper, and Dynamo. What does this mean? I'm going to kind of show you this actually in practice in a moment. But it's this idea that we have all this data living in these different silos. And there's many different ways that we can start to connect these tools together. Perhaps we've got some level data in Excel that we need to consume in Revit. And everybody seems to have their own little funky workflow. And then you want to try and share that with somebody else, but it's kind of difficult. And so we're really trying to come and just solve this problem once and for all. in an extensible and robust manner. We also have a number of other plugins in the works, Revit, AutoCAD, SketchUp, 3ds Max, and a whole ton of other ones as well. The ones that are going to be coming out very soon are the direct Revit plugin, and also our SketchUp plugin. These are already in advanced stage of testing. If you're particularly interested in one of these, you can just drop us an email at either revit@flux.io or sketchup@flux.io and join our beta testing program. So we're very grateful to get people's feedback before we release these publicly. So how does this sit in a kind of wider landscape? Well, we have the plugins. Also, you continue to work in the current design environments that you're in. If you're busy building your Dynamo script, we're not saying that you need to start using a new piece of software. Actually, you just use the Flux plugin for Dynamo. Likewise, people who like to use Grasshopper, people that like to use even Excel. And Excel is a great design tool. And it's amazing what some people can achieve with Excel. And so provide them with a plugin and let them be part of the workflow. And we can see that this kind of snake chart that we have here, it says JSON. JSON just means kind of data. It's a particular type of data structure, and it's totally irrelevant to the actual whole workflow. But it's this idea that we can take a line and express a line as a start and an end point. That's it. Yet, if we want to try and export this into a different piece of software, we're always dealing with file extensions and version numbers and things like that. Flux is trying to take all that pain away and just let you send the start and end point and the fact that it's a line. And then you send this from one piece of software to another and back again. So this is what the plugins look like. We're trying to stay as true to the local environment as possible so that these kind of plugins are intuitive to people. We're really trying to lower the burden to have to learn something new. So you can see in Excel on the far left, it's just like a regular ribbon toolbar. In Dynamo, it's just like any other package that you've downloaded on a package manager. And then Grasshopper, it's just the components on the canvas. So just to get our example started, let's say we have somebody who's working in Excel, and they're going to send not the Excel file itself, but just that data that is in the Excel file. So we've selected a certain range, the level names and the level elevations, and you'll see there that we've created what we call a connection to Flux. And this means that this connection persists. And if you change the data, this connection can be set to automatically propagate that up to your Flux project, which lives on the server. I'm actually showing you our new version of Excel. You won't see this interface for a couple of weeks yet, but I didn't want these materials to expire so quickly. And so on the other side, we've got somebody using Dynamo, and these are the Flux components for Dynamo. And they're selecting again the project, almost like it could be like the file name or your project name. And then within that project, they select what we call a key. And a key is, I guess, it could be akin to a layer in an AutoCAD drawing, let's say. But ultimately, what that is to you is totally up to you. It could be a single type of geometry. It could be a collection of different geometries. It could be points, collection of points and lines, or mesh, whatever you want. Here we can see that it is the level data that's showing up in our little inspector panel. And so, what was this all in aid of? Perhaps we're driving the levels in our Revit model with the information that was hosted in Excel directly. So here we have our data structure here, our list of lists. We just use the Dynamo components, last item and first item, to drive the level by elevation and name. Cool. And so if we bring Excel on top of this, we can see now that we can make edits directly in Excel and be driving the Revit document directly. And so, again, rather than have one person who sets the levels, emails that document to the design team, some people maybe see this email, some people don't, or some people flag it and never come back to it. We have this now live link to be able to ensure that the data is propagating out to the places where it needs to. I'm showing this connection right now in live mode. We also have something called once mode, whereby you can just say, I want to be alerted if there's new information, and I will choose when to accept it. And likewise with sending data up as well, because we recognize that sometimes you want to work in private and you're not ready to accept the updates. So in essence, we've gone directly from our Excel plugin to the Dynamo plugin. We haven't opened a web browser, we haven't done anything. We've done this totally within the native applications. And again, this needn't have been on the same computer. It could have been on totally different computers, could have been in totally different offices, or even interphone, because that data was transferred securely via the internet. Feel free to chip in with questions at any moment, by the way. So, okay, if this is all that Flux is doing, is that it, really? No, of course not. Behind the scenes, Flux is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, transferring your data backwards and forwards. So if you actually then go to the Flux homepage and log into your account, you'll land here on something called the data view page. The data view page is where you can inspect the contents of these data keys that I mentioned before. So let's take a closer look at this user interface. Again, on the bottom left-hand corner here, we have what's called the data table, and this is the collection of your data keys. And so here we're storing some Excel data, but that could easily have been a mesh from Dynamo, or it could have been some lines from Rhino. Besides that, we've opened this data key. We're looking at the contents of this data key. We can see that it's a simple table of data directly from Excel. Down at the bottom, we have some additional metadata. Here we can see the person who sent it and the timestamp when they sent it. And I think this is a really powerful kind of feature for project managers, let's say. If you really need to trace back who was the person that made that change, that's very valuable information. But does that mean you filter through your emails? Even when you find that Excel file, who actually made the change in that file? Sometimes you can't check that. But because everybody using the Flux plugin has logged into their plugin, we know who sent data at what time. And then finally on the top right, we have a little plus icon of the person. If you haven't guessed already, this means collaboration. I'll talk about that in a moment. I can see that there's another person. There's another person here that's logged into my project. So moving on to sharing, I'm going to talk about real-time collaboration. I'm going to talk about the community and inclusiveness. So just again on this collaboration button just here, what happens when we click on that? Well, it opens a dialog where I can invite one of my collaborators. So here I'm inviting Karen, one of my colleagues here, and I can then decide whether I let her have edit permissions to my project or view-only permissions. And so again, if I'm the architect and I've generated some form and I want to share that with the structural engineer, I can give them view-only access. It means that from within their plugins, they can directly read down this data into whatever application it is that they're using. So how might this look in practice? Let's say we have, again, somebody generating some freeform geometry in Grasshopper. They are sending that to the data key surface, and then the user in Dynamo on the right-hand side here chooses the Flux project and then selects surface, and we'll see this now appear directly in that environment. And because this link is live, when somebody's making edits to the freeform geometry, we can now see this directly in Dynamo on the right-hand side. And like I said before, you can go into the web browser and actually inspect that geometry directly there. And so if you have kind of your Dynamo expert and your Grasshopper expert, then they're kind of generating and sharing form, how does everybody else kind of keep tabs on what's going on? Do we have to wait until it's been documented and printed out or PDF'd. Well, actually using Flux, you can just go in directly and see this in the web browser. And just here, what we're showing is something called a public data key, whereby you can expose it at a public URL and share that with your client, share that with your manager, share that with your collaborator, and they can just directly log in and see that data as it is. If you make a modification to that data, when they visit, they'll see the latest version. And so if you have maybe, again, if you're sharing by PDF now, when you send that out to your client, that's it. Like, that is out there forever, and you've got no more control over that. If you realize you made a mistake, then what are you going to do? But if we share things in a live manner like this via the internet, it means that you can make that last minute change, or you can update the error that maybe you spotted, and then when you speak to your client, you know for a fact that they're looking at the latest data. I think this is how the technology that we're bringing is more akin to things like Twitter and Facebook. There's not multiple copies of that tweet saved on people's individual devices. But when we're using files, that's exactly what's happening right now. With a tweet, if I make an edit or I realize I've said something I regret, I can just delete it, and then I know that it's no longer out there.
Is this is the live data key a new feature, or is that already in?
So this public data key feature is alive now. It's available now. Yeah.
So potentially anybody with that link, you can put that in the email somebody.
Exactly, yeah. And the reason we did this was that if somebody else had a Flux account, then they can log in with view-only access and see these things. But if you just want to share that with, again, your client, and they're not going to sign up for an account or something like that, we just want to try and make it as seamless and as easy as possible to share data. So they just hit that link, they'll see that. And we've got much wider browser support as well for those data keys. And I think they'll even work on some mobile devices as well. Another feature that we have in the web browser environment that I think is very interesting for collaborative purposes is if you have multiple design options, and here we see 3 different options for a canopy, we can drag and drop and compare them again in the web browser. So it means that after that meeting that you've had with your client, you can leave them with this web link where they can continue to play and decide, oh yeah, I like this form, or I prefer this form with this massing. And they can actually experiment with it for themselves and let you know which one it is that they want. If you were to leave them with a file and ask them to turn layers on and off, they're just going to get confused, or you're expecting them to have some sort of license or some sort of setup. Again, if you make any modifications to these in the host programs, they'll update live in the browser. So again, this could even be used as some sort of live pinup board, where you have people pushing updates to the Grasshopper model or the Dynamo model. And again, we see that on a shared live screen. So, okay, in this instance, we've got somebody who's created these 3 surfaces, and we're going to see how the Dynamo user works with that. So, okay, the canopy was drawn in Grasshopper, but the massing is coming out of Dynamo or Revit. And so here we see my very fancy Dynamo script using some point-by coordinates and cuboids. I'm sure there's a more efficient way to do this, but this is just my method. And so, okay, I've created this massing, but I can now bring in those different options of surfaces to kind of inform my massing as I go along. And maybe, again, this other person doing the canopy studies hasn't finished yet. Maybe they're midway through their design exercise. But if we both work for the same firm, why shouldn't we just share that live data? You know, maybe it sparks a conversation, or it sparks a new idea that you haven't even thought of before. And so what I'm doing here is I'm selecting which option I want to read in as I go along. And I have these 3 different options to choose from. And then when I'm ready, I can share my massing back up to that same project. And so here we see within the plugin, I create a new data key to store this data. And then I use a toFlux component to upload that to the server. So if we go back to the web interface, we'll see a new data key with a Dynamo symbol. We can open that up and then drag on those canopies. And again, this then becomes the collaboration environment. The Dynamo user just continues using Dynamo, they don't have to even worry about setting up Grasshopper or anything. And likewise on the Grasshopper side of things. And so, again, it means that we're not expecting each other to learn and be the masters of so many different applications. And perhaps you've even got two different Dynamo users using a workflow just like this. But rather than being confined now to your own machines, you can start sharing this data in real time across different canvases.
So when you share a live data key of this, it'll take all three of those data streams with it.
Say that again?
So if you were to share the live link of this with all three of those data streams, it'll send the live link with that view.
So if I want to actually let the client see this as a composite view, we can use the flow, which I'll touch on later, to merge them together. Yeah, because each key has a unique URL. So that's the way that we've mapped it. But I think we've had some ideas about being able to configure a view, so you actually set it up with a particular camera angle, because you're trying to maybe communicate an idea to somebody else, and then you'd be able to share that. So, okay, so community is very important to us, and that's why we're here. I think the whole point of these Dynamo user groups and these other kind of meetups is really important. And so we're very active on Twitter. This is a selection of all the good things that people say about us. Filtered for sure. Actually, there's one down here which was originally bad, but we resolved it, and now it's a good one. So, but no, we're really reliant on people letting us know, like, what doesn't work, or what do you think we could be doing better. We're actively developing and improving the product the whole time. Jeremy in particular is one of our power users, and get a lot of feedback, which we're very grateful for. We're absolutely dependent on that to make sure that we're building the right product. But also interestingly, we did some student design competition last year that Karen coordinated, and got some great ideas. A lot of students using Flux in ways that we hadn't even imagined, and you can check their submissions out on our YouTube channel. We also have a community page, so if anybody has questions or they want to learn more, read some documentation, and see some examples, they can just go to community.flux.io. And again, it's somewhere where we have somebody every day monitoring, making sure we're getting rapid feedback to make sure that customers are not kind of being hindered or hitting any barriers. This is a particular article where we're driving Revit adaptive components using a Dynamo script, and with the points coming from Grasshopper or even Excel. So next up, looking forward to the future, I'm going to talk about the plugins that are on the horizon, talk about the SDK, which is not for everybody, but there are some people it might be of interest, and then finally just mention something called which we call compute. So I mentioned that we had Revit and SketchUp coming very, very soon. But we also have AutoCAD, 3ds Max, and some other software applications in the pipeline. And so, again, if people are interested in these plugins, please do let us know, because we like to have like our alpha testers and our beta testers, maybe even get some feedback. What is it that you would like to do with this particular application?
So,
yeah, sure.
Just out of curiosity, how much interest do you get for each one of those environments?
So I think Revit and SketchUp, obviously the most in demand, Revit in particular. There's a lot of people who are using Dynamo a lot in their firms, and they are just trying to, they understand that it's not for everybody, and they want kind of an entry point. Because if you can kind of show people sharing this data, it's going to stimulate their interest in Dynamo. And so it's like an educational process for some people, but they just need that simple kind of early win to kind of lure people in to this environment. But yeah, a lot of demand as well for SketchUp.
Anything for AutoCAD?
AutoCAD is pretty advanced, I would say. Again, if you're interested in that, do let us know. I think there's a lot of people out there in the world using AutoCAD, a lot of sub-consultants, interior designers. I remember working with acoustic consultants these kind of people where, yeah, they've got important information that we need to kind of bring into our models. And so the idea that we can link their line drawings and then bring that in and extrude it and turn it into something that we can use in the BIM model, it's very important. So again, if you've got some use cases in mind, we'd love to hear that.
It's more from my curiosity. So
Okay.
it's fascinating to see how AutoCAD tries and gets itself into these environments. So
I think it's just, a lot of it is just recognizing that not everybody can make this leap at the same time. And the people in this room are the people that are trying to make that leap and they see the future already. But we need to provide more kind of pathways for everybody else because they're all experts in building design and they've got a lot to contribute. And so rather than just say, well, okay, you don't want to be part of the future, so screw you guys. Actually, we're saying, let's try and support these people because, yeah, sure, we want to learn a new operating system every year. And yet that is essentially what we're expecting people to do.
No, absolutely. It's just, I know we've had a lot of issues in terms of having to redo AutoCAD work in terms of bringing it to sort of BIM environments and such things like that, or even just SketchUp too. So
I think it's very much like the right tool for the right job. Yeah. But at the same time, why do people do things the way they do? Because it doesn't work together so seamlessly, right? Everybody's kind of struggling. And so we really hope that we can try and just address this problem once and for all.
Once you start to use it, you almost stop importing and exporting.
Oh yeah?
For the most part, unless you're sending something out.
Okay, so the SDK, and so yeah, again, I don't want to scare people off that we're going on some sort of like super technical route that's not applicable to you. The interesting thing about the SDK is we have these two language supports right now, JavaScript, which is a kind of web-based language primarily, and C#, which is predominant in a lot of kind of desktop Windows applications. But I can almost guarantee that there's somebody in your firm who would be able to do something with our SDK. It means that you can build your own tools to interact with this kind of Flux infrastructure, this data transmission layer. And so if there's something unique to your firm, then again, we're providing open access to your data. And so I would highly encourage you to kind of like experiment with that or speak to one of your kind of software people if you do have one in your firm, because really it's a blank canvas and you can do with it what you want. If you just can't wait for us to build some integration with, I don't know, some energy analysis software or something like that, just go and do it right now. In fact, one of an architect we're working with, he wanted the Revit plugin to support mesh, and we're like, okay, great, we'll put that on the product roadmap. But then we turn around and he'd build it for himself using the SDK. So it's like, great, this is exactly the kind of environment we want to create. We don't want anything to be kind of holding people back. If you want to take the initiative and go and do it,
Is that Brian?
excellent. It's somebody in the UK, so. And again, what is happening at the SDK level? We're just transmitting ones and zeros as far as we're concerned. If it's some kind of data structure that Flux recognizes, then we will render it in 3D in the browser. But if we don't know what it is, we will still let it pass. There's no kind of barrier saying, okay, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to send it. Actually, we're like, we don't know what it is, but we're going to send it anyway. And so we see people taking like XML files, just sending those through Flux. Again, it could be just literally ones and zeros as far as Flux is concerned. And then I've mentioned about this thing called Compute. And so it's there available for you to go and have a look at and have a play with right now. But we'll be the first to admit it's still in very early stages. If you click on this tab here called the flow, you'll be brought to this page here. And you can see it kind of looks like a visual programming environment, just like Dynamo or Grasshopper. But why do we have this? Well, we kind of recognize that sometimes you need to manipulate some data or some geometry for it to be ready to be accepted in the next application. And so let's say, again, you've got a certain type of solid geometry in one software, but the other software doesn't accept solid geometry. So you need to explode it into its surfaces, and then you can accept it on the other side. So one way is that either the person in the first application deals with that, or somebody in the second application deals with that. But what if that part of the process could just live on the server halfway between these two people's worlds? Because maybe it won't let you perform that translation all within the first software application. Maybe it's something to do with unit conversions. Again, you're working in a model in feet and inches, and one of your sub-consultants is using metric. Well, you could provide all the unit conversions happening in the cloud on the wire. And so, again, nobody needs to concern themselves with it after it's been set up. You just carry on working and it comes out the other side just right. One that I remember happening a lot to me was people using different coordinate systems. And so for my structural analysis model, I wanted everything down by the origin. But then the architect had some model which was a few kilometers away from the origin for their own very good reasons. And so, okay, who kind of makes the compromise now? Do I ask them to move the model to where I want it to be, ready for my consumption? And then when I send it back, they undo that transformation? And it just slows everybody down, and actually we all need to work together to design this thing. Why couldn't we automate this step and again have it live in the intermediary position? So again, feel free to go and explore this feature, and again we'd love to hear your use cases for this. There's a couple of special things about it that I think make it very exciting. The first of which is these calculations that you see here are not happening in your web browser. They're actually happening on the server. And so if you're doing some very heavy lifting, if you're maybe exploding a lot of points, or you're joining a lot of mesh, or doing some panelization, if that was happening on a server, then again, just like how Autodesk allow you to render on the cloud, it's about letting you perform those complex calculations somewhere else so that it doesn't kill your local machine. Second of all, it's collaborative. And so here you can see two totally different web browser instances. And when I make a change in one, the change happens on the other. And so, okay, yeah, is it just a gimmick? No, I think it is a very powerful way for the computational designers in firms to teach others or support others. Maybe for the person who is in some remote office, you set up a workflow for them. But what happens when it goes wrong? What happens when they send some data which now has nulls or zeros and some process is dividing by zero, and it all suddenly stops working and they don't know why? Well, now the person like Jeremy or like whoever in the firm who has seen this thing before can just log in, see the issue, fix it, but let the other person see how they fixed it, and then again leave them back to their workflow, which should now be working fully operationally. So again, I think a very powerful way for people to start collaborating in the parametric design environment. And most importantly, we support emoticons. And so I know it was a real pain for me, but yeah, you can knock yourself out with all your own creative creations there. So just to recap, we talked about how Flux recognizes that if we're going to be able to collaborate better and create better buildings, we need to be able to share data in a more seamless manner. And so that is why we've started with looking at this interoperability problem. And we talked about data and not files. And so again, it's not saying that files are not needed. It's just saying that files are not necessary to share data. There's probably better ways of sharing data than sending files.
An important point of that is that you still have ordered data.
Yes.
If I share a list of points and I send it to somebody in our Rhino cloud, they're dead. I don't necessarily have the order. I couldn't necessarily make the same polygon pattern, but when I share it with ordered data, it still maintains the data.
And likewise, you can add metadata as well. So again, if people are not, there are some tools in Rhino to kind of add additional kind of like the layer name or some additional family, let's say for Revit. Again, Flux can be maybe taking the family names from an Excel sheet and then taking the line geometry from the geometry software merging them together and delivering them through Dynamo to Revit directly. And so again, rather than all the data being forced to live in one host application, we can let all these different tools work in a more seamless manner. And yeah, finally, this idea of sharing and collaborating. Again, go around and speak to these people. Also, what are your workflow challenges? Oh, I can't get my models into IES. Okay, fine. Go to the next person. What's your challenge? Oh, I have to always rebuild this model for IES. It's like, okay, everybody's facing the same problem. I'm sure if they all just took a week off and sat in a room together, like, just build some tool to solve this. And so, just like we see with the Dynamo community, just like we see with Food for Rhino, people are willing to help each other and solve these problems. And again, we want to also kind of foster this environment and support this kind of collaborative working environment to help people solve these problems collaboratively so that we can all move on to more advanced and more interesting challenges. So that kind of rounds up the first part of my presentation. And so I think we'll just take a quick break and you can ask some questions. So put it out to you guys. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Interested in 3D Max that you're working on. Can you give a preview on like what you're looking at doing with that? Or are you utilizing sort of like the Max creation graph that they introduced in 2016 or like visualization workflows?
So I'm not a Max user for my background, so we could definitely put you in touch with some of the people in Flux who would be able to talk more about it.
Okay.
I know one of the key reasons it's not kind of ready yet is that it's all about a lot of camera and camera angles and all these kind of things, setting up a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're just figuring out how to structure that data in a way that might be then easy to put into something like Unity, for example. So we don't want the data structures that we create to be highly customized to one way of looking at the world. So these are the things we're working through at the moment. But if you're interested to know more, I could definitely put you in touch with someone.
No, definitely. Sure.
Great. Oh, yeah, Susan.
So Flux is free for them.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you guys make profit?
So basically,
paid.
we all take a salary of 0. We come to events like this and eat the pizza. No, that's a good question. Actually, we've got our business development manager, Badine. Do you want to just quickly give a brief about that?
That's a question we've been getting a lot of recently, and we're certainly thinking about it. And I think right now our current approach is that we are a SaaS-based business, and so there will likely be a tiered pricing model. And we certainly want to give folks the option of having a freemium option. We don't know what that might look like, but you can imagine it's pretty relatively basic. And then from there, depending on what the needs are on the requirements, it will likely build up from there. But I think the idea, sort of the whole spirit of our pricing model will be that we want to encourage as much adoption and sort of usage of Flux as possible. So we will price it accordingly. And we will certainly take the approach of being user-centric. So I think that's all we can share right now, because that's all the information we have. But I think we want people to use it and to benefit from it. So hopefully we'll be able to announce something, I would say, towards the second half of this year.
A lot of the integration has to do with other products like Excel or Rhino or so forth. At what point do you stop building APIs for every single application
That's a very good question. Yeah, there's literally thousands of things we could integrate with.
Right.
And you're going to see a few actually in the second half of this presentation. But yeah, we don't see ourselves in the business of building plugins. But we recognize that there are some very big players in industry, and that if we can kind of set a precedent for this is how we think a Flux plugin looks like, that we just hope that one day the community might kind of embrace that and start building their own plugins and taking that forwards. And so, for example, we've got an Excel plugin, but if there's an SDK, you could build your own Excel plugin.
Do you see developers picking that up? starting to develop?
I mean, it would be like something I think would be great is that, say, I built a plugin with a colleague of mine at a hackathon for a structural analysis piece of software. And it is not the biggest piece of structural analysis software out there in the market. And we probably, as Flux, would not have looked at that. But it's my favorite piece of structural software. So I went and did it on the hackathon. And I'm kind of like now looking for other engineers to like maybe take that on, because I know that they love it too. And that if we can put this up on GitHub and develop it together, then actually we could all be benefiting. And so again, yeah, maybe DROFUS sees that they're integrating with Excel or some other product that their customers are using, but there's some type of data that's not picked up by the Flux plugin. Or they could take the SDK and build that for themselves. Something that people are asking for already is on the Excel sheet, they want to pick up the cell color. And so we don't support that just at the moment, but they could go and build that today if they wanted using the SDK. And so maybe there's an Excel plugin for Flux for facade designers, and a different one for engineers, and a different one for DROFUS customers. Mm-hmm. And so again, we just want to provide a very open API from our side, and let people again.
Do you guys, when I'm thinking any of those like community-driven ones, back up and either supporting them or advertising them so that people can find them easier? Or?
Yeah, for sure. We actually have. So I mentioned the SDK is available. It's in beta right now. So if you email sdk@flux.io, you'll be able to get a developer token. But very soon we'll have an actual developer landing page. And so this will be the place where people can say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Let's share this code together. And we'll definitely be encouraging a kind of open environment to kind of share data. But again, if firms want to build their own, bespoke ones, like HOK want to build their own suite of plugins, that's great too. And there'll be different ways, I think, for us to support that. But we'll definitely be actively supporting the adoption of the SDK and the building of these tools, and we're very happy to speak with everybody about that, for sure.
Jeremy, were you asking more along the lines of like an app store?
Not necessarily, but like even on the plugin page, showing other more mature community-driven development.
So the community could participate in ranking or like
most downloads,
most
likes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I think we should definitely do that.
Yelp reviews.
Okay. Yeah. Hey.
I have a question about analysis.
Okay.
How I can use the Flux to do some kind of like energy analysis or structure analysis. Just for example, I use Flux Paper to run script for the energy analysis and output for Flux. Right now, I might maybe just use SketchUP for everything. Is it available in the future? I just upload different message.
Yeah.
Flux website with data analysis.
Yeah. So yeah, analysis tools are like a totally different animal to, say, a BIM piece of software or geometry software. But yeah, we started working on a one for GSA, which is a type of structural software. And so what does that look like now? It means that I can send lines from any other application, and they appear as elements in my analysis model. And you can define your own way of how am I going to, define the loads. How am I going to define the restraints? And then finally you run your analysis and then send the results back. And so we are still kind of like figuring out how that looks, but ultimately the user can customize it entirely for themselves. And I think, any other question?
Yes, only the result only show the other software.
Sorry, say that again?
The result of the analysis only show.
Again, you can choose what you want to send and how you want to visualize it. And so, for example, something I've been thinking about is after you analyze the structure in the structural software, maybe you're measuring how much the building moves in a typhoon. And so I could send that data and look at it in a chart, or I could actually send the deflected geometry and look at that somewhere else too. Something that happens a lot is you need to consider the structure under a gravitational load. And so you could, run the analysis, see what shape it becomes after it's been constructed, and then send that back to the Revit model or send that back to somebody else. And so again, it's totally up to you. You can send data
You send the
another
colors
way.
along the meshes. I'm just realizing that'd be a great application. Like if you have a mesh, a
Mhm.
deformed mesh, and you have the stress analysis as a map, can you send the colors if you bake them on the road mesh?
There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't. Yeah.
I mean, you could do them as two separate streams or whatever.
And yeah, likewise with the analysis software, it could just be taking a digit, like maybe between 0 and 1, which represented the stress range or something like that, or maybe the heat range on the panel. And then again, on the other side, you decide how you want to apply your colors. And so there's some workflows that we're working on right now that I think are exactly along the lines that you're saying. One of my colleague, Charlie Patelli, is giving a class at Facades Plus in New York next week, and he's developed an interesting reflection analysis where, you remember the building in London that was melting cars? Yeah, it was like the walkie-talkie.
The walkie.
Yeah, it had like this kind of concave form, and then it was focusing the sun's rays and melting Jaguars,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you saw. But okay, now this is something that we all need to check for, right? We've learned from a mistake. Now we all need to check that we don't have this issue come up again. And so he's built a workflow that can take in your panels. It considers the sun at different times of the year and draws the vectors and then creates a heat map on the ground so you can see the focal points. And so again, we're deciding now how do we visualize that. And so we've got these kind of like circles that represent a certain amount of light, and they're colored from red to blue depending on the intensity. Again, it's totally up to the user. You can send whatever data you want. So yeah, from next week you should be able to, I think there'll be some publicly available materials showing that. Yeah.
So based on the presentation, it seems like you guys are focused on more like the initial stage of the design, but are you guys actually thinking about developing like plugins for like Naviswork, like clash detections between MEP and like structural? Because I'm actually working with a lot of consultants. There's lots of clash detections.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys thinking about developing?
You could already do that if you just pass the class report back to Dynamo and throw whatever values that you parse out to the Flux. That's already possible.
I think the tools that we've created, I mean, technically you could be in a totally different industry and still use the Excel plugin, right? There's a ton of applications. Like we're talking a lot about early stage design just because it helps give focus to the conversation and to the idea. But there's no reason why you couldn't start using these things today, even for post-construction analysis. Again, something I'll show you in a moment with a project we did with the Arduino. You can be monitoring the temperature in a building and cross-reference that with your original design.
Cool.
And so, again, it's different things to different people. And we have created a narrative talking about the early stage design. And we will absolutely be expanding that, But if you want to go and do it with Navisworks today, please, we'd love to hear what you're doing with it.
Well, the fact that Grasshopper and Dynamo were the first one with Excel, there's not much you can't touch with those.
Mm-hmm.
In some sort of another plugin or whatever else is already out there, there's usually a bridge to something that's compatible.
That was, I think the environment of Grasshopper and Dynamo are very open already, and that was one of the other reasons why we started there first. It's an open canvas where data can just be represented very easily in many different forms, and it automatically provides routes to maybe driving a robotic arm or something like that. There's all these other plugins.
Good one using from one of the student things where it was sending, I think, a Revit model from Dynamo into Grasshopper, using Rhino with a little bit of Python to save out the Google Earth file up to Dropbox, so the Dropbox was automatically pulling into Google Earth.
Yeah,
It was just this long link of things, but it was a seamless workflow.
Yeah, we can take a look at that at the end, actually. I think, Karen, did they won a prize, right? Yeah?
Yeah, it was for best visionary multi-user collaboration. It was like if every person was working in a different software, you could still seamlessly connect every single one. It's
And-
beautiful workflow.
In his video submission, he said that it would be great if there's an SDK and I can just shortcut like the Dropbox part and go straight to Google Earth. But yeah, he was visualizing his Revit model in Google Earth in the context of the buildings that
It was
already
live.
existed.
It wasn't like it was, click import now. It
Yeah.
was, he made a change and it was updated. It was
Yeah.
a little laggy, but
Yeah.
The best part was he built it within 12 hours.
There you
Like
go.
he came up with the idea, sketched it out, and then like put some stuff together and like finished the video within 12 hours. And that's it.
So yeah, we'll take a look at the competition page at the end, I think, because there's a ton of great ideas that the students did. So
Back to that question, is Navisworks one of the other applications that you're looking at? You mentioned others, but you didn't say, Navisworks didn't come up, and it's the one where all the model is being aggregated, where all these different authored files are coming together.
I would say it wasn't one of the ones that we were talking about before we launched the product to the market. It was definitely on the radar, but it wasn't in the shortlist. But more and more people are saying Navisworks to us, and we're listening. And again, every time I hear that, it's that's going to be fed back to the product team. Made sure this is made more of a priority. So, but again, please go on the community page and say this so that other people can contribute. Again, we want to build what users want. We don't have any preconceived notions about what we think we should be building. We're actively listening.
I mean, technically, you could probably already take everything from your several data stores, push it into your Grasshopper or Dynamo, save those out as a file type that Navisworks would read, and link that to a specific location on your server, and then have that file just live linked into Navisworks.
Yep.
With your reports set up, then your Clash detections, you probably can sit there and do that in 12 hours and record it.
Oh yeah.
Since all the data are communicated through Flux, only the user deliver the data to the cloud, or they save the data on the server.
Good question.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that for those on
Yeah, so the question was, as the data passes through Flux from one application to another, is a copy of it being stored? And so, the answer is yes, but we don't see ourselves as a data storage platform, really. The reason why a copy is saved on the server is that it might be going to multiple destinations, or maybe the first person disconnects, but that, the Dynamo user on the other side still wants to see what was the last data that was shared. But again, your data is private to your project. So if you have a Flux account and you create that project, you are the owner of that project, and you decide who to invite and who to kind of kick out. And so again, nobody else can kind of access that or look at that. It's not being scanned or harvested or anything. It's totally private to you, the creator of the project. And then again, from the plugins to your project, it's encrypted. It's sent over an encrypted line. And so again, we totally recognize that this is sensitive data, and take that very seriously.
The interesting development is to actually allow users to have a file where every time a new data key is saved, it will dump that JSON file into a specific folder or something on the computer somewhere.
So
you could actually do your own backup of it.
So I actually made a little bit of a hacky thing, which can kind of store values, but we are working on a more robust you'd be able to track the history of your key. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to roll back to something last week, you'd be able to do that. So again, this is something we're actively looking at the moment. But we had a user who was at a hackathon, and they linked Flux to a database platform called MongoDB. And every time they used the SDK, every time that data key updated, it took a snapshot, exactly what you said, just download the JSON. And so he had this database, he had tons of storage, so he was just snapshot. And then he could scrub, almost like rewinding through a DVD, It's like just scrubbing back, okay, that's what it was before, and then go forward, that's what it looked like now. And so, again, if that feature doesn't exist yet, like people are just building it for themselves. And then
Is that published anywhere?
I think that it will be online maybe in the near future. I don't know. It's up to them whether they're going to share that or not. I think they were intending to, so...
That would also start to tell us a lot about the evolution of it.
Mhm.
Would start to point out the efficiencies of how we develop things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or even to kind of maybe the design, it's like Chinese whispers, by the end of one stage, the design is totally different to the beginning. And to be able to review and kind of have a real design review, like why did it go off the rails? Or why did it end up like this? Or you could join a project and kind of like rewind the history and understand the context, rather than kind of proposing things that have already been considered and discarded. And yeah, I think there's a lot of potential
Even
there.
the frequency of updates could actually start to tell you when the most impact of the change.
Mm-hmm. Like there's so many things that we're thinking we could build, and that's why we're listening to users about what to prioritize. But just like I showed you at the beginning, you could see who sent the data. There's also no reason why you can't detect who's read the data. And so you could almost build up a profile of which data keys are the most important in your project. You could even say, okay, it's 3 days to submission, and the client wants to change the lobby height. And so you look at the network of data keys, who's reading what, who's dependent on that change.
Push that back down to Excel and have some graphs going.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine before you make that change, rather than it being a gamble, you know exactly how many people are affected, how many different analyses are going to need to be rerun. And then you could say, yes, we can make this change. Or you can say, actually, no, we're going to jeopardize the delivery if we make this change at this stage. And so, again, it's some really powerful project management insight, I think, to these workflows being enabled. You'll also be able to see the person who's not connected to anybody else. Go and ask them a few questions about what they're doing. Yeah.
I saw that have a new plugin that we can transfer like Microsoft Paint to visual
Yes.
to the browse into the Revit and it's very exactly. And how do you think in the future you will develop this kind of 2D drawings to browse to like 3D model like Rhino SketchUp or Revit for implementation?
Okay, so the question was, you'd seen our plugin for Microsoft Paint, and was asking how we were using that to drive 3D Revit models. Karen and myself have something to confess. It was April the 1st, and that was actually a joke.
Come on, guys.
But I've actually got that slide at the end, so I'll show that to you.
Get a Wacom tablet, hook it up to Rhino.
But you know what, I always think, if you want to build in an integration with Microsoft Word, actually, why not? Because if I'm delivering charts or something into my SD report, sure, why not? And I think some of these integrations might actually make sense. So.
I'm not more excited because it's
Yeah. No, I think there was a lot of sketching tools that we could be linking in with. And again, the 2D design still has a place in our world. And so, again, maybe these things that you're sketching on your iPad become the templates from which you start to extrude another piece of software. Yeah.
So we will write a plugin across the machine. So I was having a demo session and I generated geometry in that session. But as soon as I close that demo session, we open it and rerun the demo script or create a separate instance of that geometry. Which your plugin will address that. And the issue will it's basic components will understand that this component is used based on new data that's being simple flux. Just use that component versus replacing the component.
Yeah, so the question was, will the Flux plugin for Revit keep kind of blasting out new, fresh geometry each time it's instantiated? So the answer is in our 1.0 release, when it's publicly released, it will remember the object. And so if you've changed the outline, let's say, of a floor slab, it will make the change on the original geometry. And so it won't be blasting out and replacing. It's actually remembering, intelligently updating the model. And again, this is because users were saying like this is really important to them. They don't want to keep starting everything from scratch each time. And so yeah, we've been working on that. It's a very hard problem, but we're almost there. So yeah, good question. Okay, should I carry on with the second half?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff. I thought I'd flash some of these things up at the beginning in case you were thinking of leaving early. And I've saved the best for last. Okay, so this is like super early announcement. You're the first people in the world to hear this outside of Flux. But we have a new kind of part to the company called Flux Labs, which it's going to live at labs.flux.io. And it's a place where we can just kind of like show the experimental stuff that we build. Like when people are not working, like 9 to 5 in the evenings, we're like playing with the SDK and building our own stuff anyway. So it'd be great if we could just kind of like share this with everybody, inspire people to build their own tools with Flux. So we're going to look at some of the kind of the seed projects which came out of our hackathon last week that we're kind of like just putting up. And some of these things you can get access to. Some things they're still kind of like baking, but they'll hopefully be shared out soon. But warning, these are not the core product. When you're using our Excel plugin, our Revit plugin, these things are tested, and we're very thorough about these things. These are the things you can use with confidence on your live projects. The things on Flux Labs, there's no guarantees. They are for experimental workflows. They're the cutting edge. And so, yeah, if you want to try them out, please let us know the bugs, but please be forgiving of bugs. No guarantees here. So the first one was this thing that I made a couple of weeks ago called Dynamo Mesh Eater, because I'm not very creative when it comes to naming things. I thought it kind of like said what it did. But I had this issue where I just wanted to get a whole combination of different geometry out of a Revit model and see that somewhere else. But I downloaded the mesh tools for Dynamo, the package, and it created mesh in a very unique format that is slightly different to other applications. And so what I did was I wrote a little bit of code which just restructures that data in something that can be recognized by SketchUP and Rhino. And so here you can see a Revit model with a whole bunch of different geometries. On the bottom left, we can see that now showing up in Flux Live, and then also represented in Rhino on the top left. So I can draw something in Revit, just using all the native components. I'll use my Dynamo graph to basically collect up the geometry from these different components, and then using the mesh toolkit, which I download off the package manager, just send the mesh out to Flux. And then in Flux, I have this block here called Dynamo Mesh Eater. And again, if you go to our Flux Labs, you can request this block. It's not a standard block, so you need to kind of like ask for it. But it basically then just restructures that into something I've called a universal mesh. That's something that we can render in the web browser, something that we can send down to SketchUp or again, Rhino or somewhere else. And so again, if you're just trying to do like a visual comparison and a mesh is suitable for your needs, then you can use this. And the thing I was very pleased about was the week after I created this, 2 people rang me up saying, "Oh, like I've got a problem getting something out of Revit into Rhino." And I was like, "Oh, that's a coincidence. Have a look at this block," and it was exactly what they needed. And so finally, we can see that actual live link now going from Revit directly into SketchUp. And so, yeah, if you're interested, you can go to this link and request that block today. Something that might interest, maybe Jeremy might be particularly interested in this, some of our power users in particular. BREPs, to translate BREPs, boundary representations, from one software application to another can be very difficult, because although it's essentially the same geometry, they are represented in very, very different ways. What we've done at Flux is we've actually got access to these very advanced translation tools to translate from step to SAB or step to SAT or any kind of which way. And so very soon this will be released onto the main platform. And so when you send B-reps from one software application to another, that will just seamlessly appear natively in the host program. So I think that's a very exciting feature to come soon.
It's not a man to share.
Yeah. This is another one I built on a Sunday because I haven't got a life. We're using Slack a lot at Flux, and I don't know if other people are using Slack or whether you're using Microsoft Link, but I thought, wouldn't it be cool if somebody overwrote my data key or somebody updated some key that I'm interested in, that I couldn't get a notification for that. And so again, Slack has this open API which I could just hook up to. And so again, I used the Flux SDK for JavaScript, just wrote a few lines of code, and now all of a sudden when things are updating, I'm going to get some sort of Slack message for that. And I've shown a couple of examples on the right hand side. You see it's still very hacky, but it's something I'm kind of working on in my spare time. So again, you can hook these. At the end of the day, it's just data. And so send it to this application, send it to that application. You could use it to send automatic emails or SMS alerts, or you could have it posting to Twitter for you, or you care. This idea is that it's just data. It's just transmit it. This is a picture of it, a little animation of it in action. So I'm kind of sliding some number down here, and that's getting published directly to my Slack channel. So yeah, still requires some work, but again, if anyone's interested, give me an email. Dynamo to Web VR, and this was something that came out of the hackathon last week. And actually, we've got something set up at this web link already. At the moment, it only works on Android Chrome, but if anybody has an Android phone and wants to try this out, they can go to that web link. And I've got a couple of Google Cardboards that you can play with. So maybe after the presentation, you can give this a shot. But again, we'll be trying to make this code available very soon. But there's this idea that you've got some line geometry or some mesh in whatever host application. You just send it to that Flux data key, and then you go to that web link and you'll see the latest geometry. And then you make a change, and then you just hit refresh on your browser, and you'll see the latest geometry. There's no kind of baking, there's no compiling, there's no having to deal with the Apple Web Store or anything like that. It's just making that data public and available immediately at that destination. Again, you can see we've got a link down there, labs.flux.io/fluxvr. This one's kind of just slotted in there because I didn't have anything to show you just yet. It's something we're actively working on though. We're looking at dashboards. And so if you have all this data flowing through your project, maybe the total area of facade or the volume of some different parameter or the number of components, that might be useful to you to kind of see as like some sort of heads-up display. Excuse me. And so I've taken these examples from Tony Stark, who obviously is a big fan of dashboards. And so, we're trying to think about how might this be useful to Flux users. And so we're actively researching this at the moment. And so if anybody has any ideas, we'd love to hear from you. And so please, you can email there, julia@flux.io. And we're just really relying on real use cases to help drive these developments. We're not kind of just making stuff for the fun of it. It's actually, how is this going to be applicable to people in industry? So please do get in touch with us. This is another one I was working on with a colleague of mine, pathfinding. A lot of people are doing pathfinding. There's a lot of very powerful tools out there to do pathfinding, but sometimes you want to just do a lightweight analysis. And there's more and more plugins. I've seen some on Food for Rhino that allow you to do this, but you're always constrained to one software application or another. So, okay, great, you've done it for Rhino, but what about people using Dynamo? What about people using SketchUP? So I went online and I found this project. Just skip forward to this one. It's called pathfinding.js/visual. And so some very generous software engineer has just compiled all these different algorithms for pathfinding and made them available publicly for free. And so I was like, well, great. He's done all the hard work for me. I just need to package this up in Flux. And so again, with my colleague, we did that. And now we have it available in Dynamo. And so you can see here, all I'm doing is changing my, my start point for the path finding. So it sends that data up to Flux. Flux recomputes the shortest path and then delivers that back down to Dynamo. And so I'm showing this at the moment as a set of points, a chain of points, but there's no reason you couldn't just then redraw that as a polyline. There's no reason why you couldn't even just have this being drawn in Excel. Again, it's just data at the end of the day. Let it be represented however you want. And so again, it means that person who creates a pathfinding tool creates it once in this agnostic environment, and then people in any different software application can start leveraging that power. If I just go to here, this is what it looks like on the Flux side. Again, once it's been set up, the person in Dynamo needn't care. If they're interested, if they want to go there, they want to modify it, they want to start adding maybe passenger profile data, so maybe somebody acts differently to somebody else, like they can just start adding another part to that workflow and maybe sharing that with other people. But if you've set that workflow up and then you want to share it with somebody else, they just can continue to use that in Dynamo, continue to use that in whatever software application they want. And so there we can see that exact same data that's available in Flux is also available to you in Dynamo. Arduino. Who's heard of Arduino? Yeah, it's amazing how many people have heard of Arduino. Arduino, Raspberry Pi, this idea that you can get these cheap sensors, noise, light, sound, movement, all sorts of things. So actually Jen, who's here, one of our co-founders of Flux, her hackathon project was to link up some Arduinos to Flux and basically take temperature readings from different locations in the office and plot that on a 3D model of the office. And so we could kind of see maybe in the web browser, oh, I'm feeling pretty hot right now, like where can I go in the office that's cool? And then maybe everybody decides to do that and then it heats up and so you go somewhere else. Again, the same thing could have been done for like noisy areas or where is the current best lighting in the office. As well, if you've built a building, you had an idea of how it might function, you could be placing these very cheap sensors and then for the lifetime of the building be monitoring that and even providing follow-up services to that client. You can say, oh, hey, you can literally go on the phone and say, we noticed that the building is not performing as we'd intended. Can we come in and check it out? You come down, maybe everybody's got the windows open when they should have been closed according to the building management system. And so again, we're just trying to make sure that this data gets to the right people at the right time. And so we did a hackathon, again with some other clients, and we used this to generate some dynamic facade panels. And so we would expose the Arduino to light, and then the panels would open according to a Dynamo script, and then we would shield that from the light, and the panels would close again. And so again, it's there's so many applications that you could be using with this. And this is again another picture of Jen's hackathon submission. We were representing the data like a three-dimensional bar chart, so it was going up and down depending on the temperature in any particular room. The code has been made available on GitHub, and so you can go to flux.io/fluxduino to get your hands on that and play with it yourself. Unity. Who's heard of Unity? Oh, okay. I've got a lot of advanced people in the room. Very pleased. So yeah, everybody loves Unity once they find out what it is. Unity is a gaming engine. It is incredibly cross-platform. You can use it to make iPhone games, PlayStation games, Xbox games, PC games, whatever. And a lot of people are always saying, we're designing buildings. You play this video game and you can walk around these buildings and these buildings are blowing up and falling down and regenerating. Like, why can't I do that? Like, why can't I walk around my building? And so Unity, I think, is starting to provide a really great pathway for us to really experience the buildings that we're designing as we're designing them. And so I took a Revit model and I used the Flux plugin for Unity, which one of our colleagues built last week at the hackathon, and it's super cool. So I'm going to quickly show you now. I said it before. Hopefully this works. Go. So here's my Revit model.
What was the why choice of Unity over Unreal 4?
Could have used either. Absolutely no reason why. I think I haven't investigated Unreal 4 a lot myself.
4 is free for it.
Oh, really?
Because it's on a
Unity's not.
Unity's not.
So I know Unity's free if the application you're using it for has got revenues less than $100,000 a year or something like that.
Oh,
And
okay, so it
it's-
changed the.
Yeah, I think it's only really.
It was when Unreal came free, they changed their
They had
policy.
to.
Okay, cool. But yeah, if you want to do this on Unreal, like that would be great too.
No, that was exactly the reason.
It was just like 6 months
They
ago.
altered that.
So what I'm showing here is again just my Revit model, and behind the scenes I've got my Dynamo graph, which is again collecting up the data and sending that to a Flux data key called Revit Mesh. If I go and look at Flux over here, you can see I'm turning that from a Revit mesh into a generic mesh, which I can then consume in Unity. And if I go to Unity, hit play, I can now, might be a bit laggy because I'm using WebEx. I can now walk around, and you can jump, and you can fire frisbees, and I'm going to try and get it in there. But okay, maybe I'll walk through here. And okay, please remember this is live demo now. Okay, so let's see if this works. I want to walk through this wall right now, but I can't. There's no door. So I'm going to go over to Revit. I'm going to get a door. It's going to ask me to do something. I'm going to place a door here. Okay. And now that's going to get sent up to Flux. Just let that do its thing. Okay. And so we see in Flux now, this door has now appeared in our mesh. And if I go back to my Unity game, I press P, and the door appears. So now I can walk through this door. And so
You
yeah,
just invented a game.
and so you can now literally drive your Unity game in real time from your Revit model. So if you're doing a live demo with a client right now and you say, hey, what if we just change all the column sizes and change the positionings? What if we put a brace there? What if we change the staircase from here to there? If you can drive a Revit model, you can drive a Rhino model, you can now immediately see that update in Unity. And again, I've shown this all on a single computer. There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't have somebody back in the design office making these changes and driving this as you talk to them on a telephone call. And the ability now to communicate your design to your client and to explore potential design options is, I think, incredible. So I'm very excited about this.
Gamepad inside Unity.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to do this, if you want to let the client sit on their sofa playing PlayStation, and maybe we can even put some bad guys in there, chasing them around. No reason why.
Playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
In your project.
And so, anyway, I think this is a really, really powerful application.
Can you keep the material information?
Material, we can send the colors separately at the moment, but again, yeah, we're looking for more and more support like JPEGs, all sorts of things. So you could pull in, using the SketchUP plugin, you can actually get terrain directly from Google Earth, and then we could have that appearing in Unity immediately. There's so many different ways.
Multiple softwares to me, pulling data from multiple softwares.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's a mesh here, it's a mesh there. Like, why can we not just seamlessly transmit these things between different applications? And that's like Flux's starting point. If we can let people now send all this data here, there, and everywhere, then there's all manner of potential kind of workflows that we could do. So again, this is the starting point for Flux.
Well, that's another interesting point is that you might, in a workflow like this, you might do this, even if you did it manually, possibly. You do it so many times, the amount of time that you spent redoing it. What you've just done is you've made it so that that workflow can be recycled. It's a Grasshopper, or it's a Dynamo script, and it's a Flux flow.
Yep. And this is as easy as going and copying that project now. And again, we're just tidying up these files, but these Unity files will be up on Flux Labs in the next few days, and you just download them, and away you go. There's no complex setup or anything like that. Again, I didn't build this; my colleague built this, and he just set me up, and now that's it. I'm like, go nuts playing with it. So, yeah, again, you have these people. Again, the people in this room right now, the people that are thinking about the new technology, about Dynamo, about graphical programming languages and things. You can now go and make everybody else kind of empowered, enabled to use these tools as easily as possible. Because when people get a taste of it, then they're going to start paying attention and then become part of it. And so again, we're trying to help inspire people to start embracing these tools and again, like putting their ideas into practice. Everybody has tons of ideas. That's the thing that we're definitely finding. Everybody's, I could link this with that, and then it would do this. And so, great, let's do it. Now we can do it. So, yeah.
Do you have any execution plans that people can see in that regard? Just sort of like demo execution plans on how to run a project or something else within the site, within the community. I'm a baby to all this, so.
Yeah, no, we've got, there's quite a lot of people using Flux right now on live projects. And so as they kind of put that into practice, we will be turning them into kind of case studies. I could quickly show you now, actually.
I think good SDUGs for utilizing from the start, using different combinations to see the advantages that come from it to adapt it together.
So some of the questions that come through on the community portal, we will write them up so that everybody else can kind of benefit from that. What I'm showing here is a user over on the East Coast who was trying to link their facade panel schedule with their Grasshopper model. And so, again, once we help them solve this problem, we kind of turned it into an article so that everybody could see this real application. And so here he's able now to change the color index in the Excel sheet and have that directly drive his model. And actually, his model was even more advanced. It was even changing the family types on those panels in the Revit model as well. And so he was fully synchronized between all his different software applications.
That's awesome.
And so, again, if you want to use that, there's an article right here on Flux.io.
Actually having a professional plan, what we would agree upon, have something for each discipline to regard.
Another one perhaps is
system, sort of like what the execution plan would be right now, but
about driving adaptive components. Again, I think people using Dynamo do this quite a lot. This ability that it's all being automated behind the scenes. You set up the Dynamo graph once, and now the user can make modifications on the left, and after that's been recalculated in Revit, you should see it update on the right-hand side. There we go. So, again, and all the steps required to do that are here, and I think that the files as well available at the bottom. Yeah, we've got some online tutorials for that. So, if we go back to the slides. So that kind of brings me to the end of this second part of the topic of the presentation. And again, it's just this idea that you can essentially hook it up to anything. Flux is agnostic to the data that you're sending. And so you want to hook two things up together. If they allow data in and out, then we can make that happen. And I've placed a link up here on the top right for the slide deck. So you can just go there and see these slides. I know that it's been recorded, and so again, if you want to kind of revisit or look at any of the links or addresses that I've shown throughout this presentation, you can do that. And so I think, yeah, if you go as well to this these slides, there's some hyperlinks there to some of the other resources we've looked at. And then I was going to finish up on the Microsoft SketchUp, Microsoft Paint integration there. So yeah, we might look at it again next April 1st.
Can you go back to the one with the Google Slides?
Yeah, sure. So the VR, right?
The one where you have the link to the slides.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes.
Do you have any documentation for that? I'm just curious, you guys
All right, so the last part of the presentation is just to give us a overview of the node of the month. So you can hang for 5 minutes. I'm going to show you how do we use the remap node. The concept behind it is very simple. Remap enables us to transform a list from one domain into another domain. And what that means is we have a series of numbers with the start and the end value. And what the node enables us to do is to remap or transform this list into a different list that has a different start number and end number. I'm just launching Revit here, and hopefully it works.
What, not 17 yet?
Not yet. Still not out, is it?
It is.
Really? Well, that was a great presentation from Flux. Makes me wants to rename this group as Flux User Group moving forward. So much potential. Let's take it somewhere.
Flux had the whole like building generator that was like built out of like dots to like right?
Yeah, so it was introduced because it covered a very limited area.
Yeah.
So you could select any person and then
You can use one shot.
I am already in the center. Okay.
Yeah, I think I saw one of your presentations that you gave about it. Yeah, that's curious. Understanding the building code and turning it into meaningful information. Yeah.
Sort of also I was just curious if there was again, I understand the wrong stuff is sort of just it doesn't really go
I like your dark hourglass. Intimidating.
This? Yeah. I think it's a ramp thing, like it takes a long with WebEx.
WebEx is a log.
All right, here we go.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm going to start by creating a very simple list series. A series from 0 to 10 every let's do this every 2. So this is going to create a list from 0 to 10 every 2 units. I don't know why it's generating it. Let's see if it did it. I'm not completely sure why it's so slow. I think it's WebEx that takes a lot of resources, plus I'm taping it at the same time, but normally it doesn't take this long. All right, there it is. So the remap range, what it does is to transform the domain of these lists from one start value to another value using a new minimum and a new maximum value. So if I want to transform that list that you see on the left and make it read from value 0 to 1, then I can totally do that by plugging the new minimums, the new maximum, and the output out of this node is going to be a list with the same amount of values, but instead of being mapped from 0 to 10, it's going to be mapped from 0 to 1. So I know it's so slow, but it's that's the concept behind it. So why is it important? Why would you want to remap? I think one of the main applications is because geometry in general, lines and surfaces, are typical, can host elements using parameters. Parameters, it's a range, it's a relative range that is usually mapped from 0 to 1. If you think about the parameters of a line, the start of a line is your point 0, the end of your line is point 1. Right? So if I want to have a distribution of objects or points along a line, then and this distribution follows certain pattern. I have this ability to assign the parameters using a series and utilize remap to convert it into a series from 0 to 1. And just to do that quickly, I could just let me use code here. I'm going to define two points. Point 0. Here, that's the origin. And then define another point. Say 40, 40. And then I create a line by start and end point from PT1 to PD2. So that's going to create a line in the background. What's wrong here? I have to put this 0. not even sure why I'm getting this error. Hmm? Line by start point, end point. Yeah, that's good. Let's try something else. Let's try the rectangle. Width and length 40 by 40. I don't know what it is. They're supposed to be there.
It's the graphics.
Yeah.
It's the graphic anyway.
So Flux needs to go
That was probably. Yeah, I was trying to. Let's do one more effort. I'm gonna pick this line, create a line here, and pick it up from the Dynamo. See if enable me to select something. It's totally weird. It's not working. I'm probably depleted of RAM, and that's what's happening. Well, there is the rectangle. An hour later. So I can make a distribution of these points along a boundary of a curve, utilizing remap. So if I curve parameters, curve. So I select this curve and distribute this list of parameters. Then this distribution of points is going to appear across the perimeter of the rectangle, and that's how we can map different patterns of lines, different pattern of points. So what I also use it for is to distribute elements on a lines picked from Revit. For example, if I want to distribute some windows in a facade, and these facades actually follow A, B, C distribution, then I'm able to point the insertion point of those families, and then I could use remap in order to place them in Revit. And I believe the color range, I mean, when they introduce color in Revit, it needs an input of values between 0 and 1. So if we want to, say, assign a distribution of colors based on the areas, we can certainly extract that information from Revit, but then this list of areas has to be mapped into a color values between 0 and 1 in order to let Dynamo pick a specific color. So yeah, that is remap range. I think there's also a written version on the code block. It's called math remap. And what's great about this drop-down list is it tells you what's going next. So the first input is a list. So I can just call it, I can just come up with a variable like list 1. My minimum, let's say it's 10, and the maximum it's 20. This is gonna look for a list, so I can plug my list, run it, and then I have the same effect as the node, just in a shorter single code as opposed to having 3 different inputs. At the beginning, I didn't know what it was used for, and I confused it with the list map. The list map is a completely different node, and that's probably the candidate for next month. Jerry might do it. Well, why we use it? Any questions on this? Very straightforward.
So what is the topic for next month?
So the topic for next month, we'll have Alexander Bergin. She's enterprise support specialist for Autodesk, and she's used or developed some Dynamo workflows to provide model maintenance. So if you're curious, sign up for the next month, and the announcement is out. Also, don't forget to sign up in our blog to get the latest announcements. I know, hopefully we can get the Flux people back with us sometime soon. It looks like what you guys doing is changing very fast and furious. So in 6 months, we might see a different array of new things. So you're welcome anytime.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.